It was defeat for Norwich City in Middlesbrough on Saturday, but the general trend still feels to be ticking upwards under Philippe Clement. Norwich City not out of the woods, but are crucially, since we last recorded this show, out of the relegation zone. 9 points from a possible 12 from 4 games that on paper looked very, very testing. And they now approach a February full of crunch games and opportunity to really lift themselves out of danger. Welcome to this week's PinkUn.com Norwich City podcast. I'm your host, Connor Southwell, joined by Paddy, Davitt. We are recording on deadline day eve. Norwich City still trying to get a few bits and bobs done. We will speak about that as the show goes on. But Paddy, let's start with Middlesbrough, because I mean, you spoke to Philippe Clement yesterday. I spoke to Rory McConville yesterday after the game. Even when the players went over, they were serenaded with chants of yellows and applauded for their endeavour. That felt, in spite of the result, like another sign that perhaps things are slowly but surely moving in the right direction, that they need to get themselves out of the mess that they found themselves in prior to Philippe Clement's arrival.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, for me, they're going to a team who last 2 games at Riverside, they've put 4 past Southampton and then 4 past Preston. And okay, Southampton's season hasn't followed the arc they probably expected coming out of the Premier League, and Will still going in there initially. Nevertheless, two very good competitive Championship squads, and they were completely dismissed. So by a team who themselves now, by dint of that result yesterday, draw level with Coventry at the top of the table. Nice little buffer now to third place in terms of the automatic situation. It is looking set fair. That is a squad, a head coach in Kim Hellberg, and a fan base who not get ready or prepare for the Premier League, but it feels like that there is a momentum behind them, and it will take two clubs that I don't see in this division at the minute to be better than them for them to not be in the Premier League next season. So set against that context, Norwich have gone there and didn't get blown away like a Southampton or a Preston, far from it. Frustratingly, contributed to their own downfall in terms of the goal. Good a strike as it was from Hayden Hackney, and we'll dive into that in due course. But to leave there with a sense that, no, we were a match for a team on that curve. And for me, the key is you contrast that with where Norwich were pre-Clement, and there's absolutely no way, no possible scenario that would suggest that prior to Clement they go there and do what they did yesterday. So yes, okay, filtered through the result, it's the end of a 4-match winning run, league and cup. But I think in terms of performance, it was another step forward because of the calibre of opponent they were playing. Off the back of turning over Coventry at Carrow Road. So, yeah, as Philippe said, Friday, it cannot just be this growth. There will be slightly stepping back. There will be frustrations. There will be disappointments. There will be mistakes, and all of those things rang true in terms of that Norwich performance on Saturday at the Riverside. But underpinning it all, I think, was a sense that even allowing for a fresh wave of injuries and absentees of some key players, that is a squad who can go to Middlesbrough away and compete, and not just, as Philippe said, go with a low block and cling on for dear life and hope Middlesbrough have an off day in front of goal. No, actually, bravely, very high press, trying to be progressive, trying to make it a very expansive game, and trying to cause them problems going the other way. And I think you could argue, certainly compared to Wrexham, West Brom, Coventry, they lack that cutting edge, that clinical edge, which has been the feature of these recent games. But you can't fault the ambition or the willingness to try and, as I say, take a step forward rather than take a step back in terms of mindset and approach. And so all of those things, I think, would probably reflect in the reaction of the fan base in the ground, and maybe the reaction on social media subsequently, that yes, okay, it's a defeat, but it's a defeat that probably doesn't shake the belief that under this head coach and this group of players, they're moving forward.
Yeah, I would agree. It felt like a kind of out of possession game mostly. I know Borough obviously had more of the ball and probably more of the territory as well, but it was a case of two really organised teams pressing quite cleverly, I thought, for most of the afternoon. And you mentioned it there, Paddy, the fact that Norwich are now in a space where they can go away to the very best, in my opinion, current team in the Championship. No offence, of course, to yourself and other maybe Sky Blues. But I think on current form, and certainly you look at since Philippe Clement has been at Norwich, Middlesbrough have taken the most points. They're the best attacking team. They've conceded the fewest goals. All of that is a recipe for kind of where they're heading, which is the Premier League under Kim Helborg. For Norwich to go toe to toe was really encouraging, I think. And that's maybe been how we kind of framed this week, I think, on our last show, Paddy, ahead of that Cov game and then Middlesbrough. This is all very well and good. Norwich have been on an upward curve. They've got some really good results. They're in a good rhythm under Philippe Clement. But actually, against the very best in the division, how close could they get to them? Particularly given the two reverse fixtures where they were beaten by Middlesbrough under a different manager, but probably deservedly so on the day. And then that Coventry game where they got absolutely battered. And I think you compare both of those games to what's happened this week, where Norwich deservedly beat Coventry, and maybe on a different day, if they don't make a mistake, that ends up as a goalless draw. But I think Borough probably did shade it. But even so, those two performances, alongside the ones earlier in the season, chalk and cheese really, which from a Norwich perspective is the direction of travel that's going to be needed from here.
Yeah, but and we will probably get into it in more depth later on in the podcast. There are challenges ahead. I'm thinking primarily, the miss that is Pellemats, and we know as we record that they're really trying to bring in to use Clement's phrase, a ball playing number 6. This section may date very swiftly over the next day or two, but nevertheless, there are challenges. Harry Amass, that situation as well, all the other injuries. We have to reference Josh Sargent. That's a sore that needs to somehow or other be resolved to the satisfaction of all parties. So maybe just to chime in with what Clement was trying to frame it, I think for the rest of this season, that they're not out of the woods. They still have to keep their foot down and keep the likes of Portsmouth and Charlton and maybe Blackburn now pertinently, as that's the next game. Carrow Road in the rear view mirror. But even so, I think Philippe Clement has already shown he's had to navigate similar kind of challenges already in his relatively brief tenure with Norwich. And, my mind goes back to Tony Springett playing left back at Watford that day. But and that was a game they probably lost a tad, unfortunately, in terms of how that game played out. But I think so much of this debate is now squarely filtered through Philippe Clement and the fact that because he is at the helm and everything he has done in terms of what he's done with that group of players, performances and results, also how he carries himself in terms of publicly and just exudes confidence and a self-belief that I think if you're a Norwich fan now, you know that group of players and the club more broadly are in very safe hands with him, and even allowing for those challenges that he has to now navigate in terms of the squad and the makeup of the squad. I think it's it's an exciting end to the season rather than one to dread, one to fear, one to worry about the negative consequences and connotations of where they were tracking. I think now, even if it would be wildly optimistic to sort of punt these top 6 ambitions, even if it was still an upward trajectory to a top 10 finish, hypothetically, then I think they then go into another summer transfer window where you'd like to think there'll be more time, there'll be more player availability to add more Philippe Clement type profile players to the group and maybe sift out some who aren't necessarily in that box. And then, next season, before a ball is kicked, I'm pretty sure that there will be managed optimism, hopefully, but nevertheless, optimism around that football club that Philippe Clement can really attack the top 6, because we know that's the mid to longer term ambition. That's why he's here. There's an interview he's done in Belgium, I think, in the last few days. We saw them there. There was camera crew there after the Coventry game midweek. I think that's now gone out. And in that, the clip that you flagged that I've seen, he tells an anecdote that when Norwich first approached, he more or less told his wife, "Well, I'm going over to have a conversation, but don't worry, we won't be going there. There's no chance of that." And obviously, then the rest is history. And he talked about that at his unveiling, and subsequently about the alignment he felt, the from Matanasio and Norfolk Holdings downwards, the sense that he could buy into their honesty and the project, and because of that, he's here, and he's shown how all in his ear he is, to the point where, he's now walking a bit of a disciplinary tightrope because he's so invested in terms of what's going on. As he said, when he picked up his second yellow card yesterday in 2 championship games, he's there fighting, in the corner with his team, and it is his team, and this is his club, and that's why I think, as I say, the rest of this season, but realistically now the summer and then the start of next season, it's hard not to feel that Philippe Clement will have Norwich firmly competing at the top end of the table, as they have shown against top 6, top 2 title contenders in Coventry and Middlesbrough in these past few days.
Yeah, it does feel like there's some fun to be had down the track, providing they can obviously get their house in order and avoid that drop. And obviously, as we'll come on to later in the show, February, a big month in terms of that bottom of the table, I think, in terms of some of the games that are coming up, especially at Carrow Road, and the opportunities that await them as well to potentially get themselves out of it. Paddy mentioned there, and we'll come on to a little bit more on Philippe Clement in a moment. But yeah, second yellow card for him at the Riverside Stadium in the dying seconds. It was a Jovan Makama foul, or a foul against Jovan Makama, or given against Jovan Makama, that really irked him. I think he's just so big, so whenever he puts his hand on someone, I think it is a bit higher. It isn't in the best position sometimes, and that seems to go against him. And it kind of felt like it was one of those where both of the players had a handful of each other's shirts, and yeah, that irked him. But a second booking for him in 2 games. He's now 1 away from what would be a 1-game touchline ban. So I'm sure Norwich and him would be quite keen to avoid that. But like you say, Paddy, I think it shows his investment and how keen he is for this team to continue the strides that they have been taken. Let's talk about the goal then that obviously ultimately won this game. A brilliant strike from Hayden Hackney, who I think you can see and Kim Helberg said this post game as well, is a cut above most at championship level. Certainly no disgrace to lose to a strike of that nature. But I think what more the question marks will come about, Paddy, is the nature or the way in which it kind of unfolded from a Norwich perspective. They were playing the ball out from the back. It was a ball back to Vladan Kovacevic. Kenny McLean drops to try and show. I think he's basically trying to create space for Kovacevic to clip the ball into. Kovacevic doesn't play that game. He goes short. Kenny McLean then tries to play out to McConville. It's not the best pass, and from there it all gets a bit messy. Conway turns it over. Target then rolls it to Hayden Hackney, who sticks it in the top corner. So as well as Norwich City did yesterday, as much encouragement as we can take from their performance, that was a really frustrating aspect, the nature of how they've probably lost that game.
Absolutely, and let's work back. I mean, it is, and you've referenced, I mean, for me, he's the best midfielder in the division, Hayden Hackney, and it takes a strike of pure quality, that the action on the ball, because it almost starts central and then it veers. I mean, Kovacevic, no keeper's getting that for me. So, but that magnifies what was at source Norwich error. And I mean, I've seen the debate subsequently, social media. It feels a bit redundant to me about why are Norwich playing out for the back as opposed to why do they presumably not, i.e. go long. But it's not about that. It's about making the right decisions, because there was 2 or 3 instances prior to in that first half where they had successfully, using that kind of pop pass pinball deep sort of build-up play approach, got themselves out, had beaten the Middlesbrough press, had got themselves into midfield. There was, trying to think, that's just popped into my head. There was a flowing counter, I think, Slimani and 1 or 2 others, which I think might have started with McConville actually. I think it ended with Ali Ahmed, and it was like a double ricochet, and it came to nothing in the end. But that back to front nature was effectively them working the ball through and trusting themselves to be able to progress the ball. So that is how Philippe, you're going to come back in there, Connor, but you're going to tell me that I'm sure that's how Philippe Clement wants his team to play. I don't think for me.
I was just going to insert the example that we saw against Coventry in the first half. Do you remember when, I can't remember who fizzed the ball into Jose Cordoba, but there was a proper, it wasn't the best pass in the world, but then Norwich off the back of it got up the pitch and created something. So it is that kind of risk and reward element. And I think Clement has spoken about it before. That's kind of what he wants his teams to do.
Well, exactly, yeah. So to have a debate about, well, they can't do that anymore because it leads to a goal of that majestic quality in terms of the finish. It overlooks the fact that, well, then you want Philippe Clement to set his team up in a very different way, and in terms of the build-up phases and possession phases. No, what they need to do is, as players, play the situation that they see in front of them, and that pass is never on from Vladan Kovacevic into Kenny McLean. He's got I don't know which Borough play it was, but he's pretty much inside his shirt. He's that touch tight. He's running back towards his own goal. The risk element, if you want to go risk and reward, was too high for that pass. That pass was never on. And then obviously McLean, because of the attentions that he's got behind him, it's the heavy touch, and from there, bang bang, and it's in the back of the net, and compounded by the fact that one action has decided this game. They go on and win 4 or 5. We're not having this debate. We say, oh, well, wasn't that opening goal a bit of a self-inflicted blow? But then, how good were Borough to really show their dominance and how much better they were than Norwich? The fact that it effectively, that one phase of play settled the game, is why there is such a focus on it post-match, I'm sure. But, for me, we've also had the debate. We've had it, plenty have had it, about Kovacevic, that is what he is. He pulls off an unbelievable save at Wrexham to secure that win when he claws a ball. How he did it, I don't know, but he claws that ball back from the goal line late on. Not many keepers in the Championship, I think, were capable of producing that action, and that action alone has secured Norwich 3 massive points at Wrexham that day. But equally, he makes a poor decision there with the ball at his feet, and we've seen examples of that. I mean, there was also another poor decision just before the hour mark when he's come out of his area and thought he could get him roll in front of Conway and has completely wiped the guy out. And it's only for me, Kellen Fisher is round on the cover, and maybe the ball, it flies in the direction of the corner flag that saves him from a red card. Again, a rush of blood, an impulsive action. That's in his nature. That's in his keeping DNA. And it's, you either accept that because you get the brilliance, or you say, okay, well, he's not for me, if you're a Norwich fan. And then it's, hopefully, if that's your view, then Philippe Clement comes round to that view, and then Vladan Kovacevic is no longer Norwich's number 1. But that's in a debate for a different time, probably a different transfer window. But I don't really see why there's a wider focus on stylistically what Norwich are doing, other than the keeper has made a poor error, and they were punished by a very, very good player in terms of the finish, and that's what it boils down to, really. So, come on, I had to ask him, obviously, a post-match, and I thought he was good. His answer was, of course, that's not in that aspect of the game what they were looking to do, clearly, because it led to that. But equally, players make mistakes. His players make mistakes every week in the Championship. He made mistakes as a player. The best teams, he said he watches, they make mistakes. That is the nature of it, unfortunately, and it is a little bit of a cliche, but when a keeper makes a mistake, it normally is terminal, and it proved to be in this case. But as I say, for me, it's a mistake. We can all see it's a mistake. You hope in a similar scenario he makes a better choice. But to widen it to, right, that's it now, Norwich have to go long. It feels like we're back at the Torup sort of debate. And while he isn't maybe as philosophically wedded to a style of play, Clement, I don't get that sense. He's a bit more pragmatic. Nevertheless, in terms of his deep build-up play, go and look at any game since he's come in at Norwich, and you would see a variant of that. And we saw that, as I say, in the first half anyway, at the Riverside. So for me, it's really boils down to, in that scenario again, next time you would hope Kovacevic makes a better decision.
Yeah, agreed. And I think the thing is, this only seems to get kind of reduced to a stylistic debate when it involves, playing out from the back. If he would have gone long there, and let's say Malander or Ayling win the first contact, the ball gets nodded down and Hackney hits one from 30 yards. No one says, well, what a stupid decision that was to play the ball long, when he could have played it out. That's not a debate we have. It seems to be only around when you concede the ball, possession of the ball in and around your own box. And ultimately, it's not that has made Norwich concede. And actually, and I know you made this point earlier around Rue McConville, and he said this post-game as well, and it was my thoughts after the incident, which was there was a spell where Norwich were kind of bouncing the ball off McLean and Wright and creating some nice angles. And McConville in particular had 2 real opportunities within that move to break the press, to play forward and to get Norwich on the sort of moves that we spoke about, and just did not take those opportunities, whether it was he didn't quite have belief that the pass was on, or he could play it, or he could clip it into the area, or I don't know, maybe he saw something. Who knows? Only he could answer those questions. But if he then takes that route, then Norwich don't concede. So ultimately, we're not talking about a playing out from the back situation here. We're just talking about a poor decision, and poor decisions happen all over the pitch. And Norwich made plenty of poor decisions in the final third as well. That isn't. People don't then say, "Oh, well, it's because they want to play their way into the final third." That debate feels very difficult. And I think as well, you have to remember, as I said, that Middlesbrough are, with the way that they press, the way they're structured, a really, really good team. I think we've seen all of the Championship teams now, some of them twice. This league is much for muchness, really. I don't really feel like there's a huge, there's tiers of different quality. But I think with Middlesbrough, it does feel like they are on a bit of a different level to everyone else. So and Hayden Hackney proved that. But I still think with the shot that Hackney has, no one gets tight enough. No one gets tight enough to mat target. There's not that reaction and recovery that you want to see when they lose the ball. So there's lots of aspects that also go wrong. But yeah, I think just to distill it down into a should they play out from the back, yes or no, I think that's almost simplifying it. That doesn't really, I think, for me, solve this issue, which was Vladan Kovacevic just making the wrong decision where, it should have been clipped into an area, or it should have been utilised more as a percentage ball. And I'm sure if he had that opportunity again, he would take that. And as I said, I think McLean's almost running towards his goal to create that space to almost try and then give him an opportunity to clip it into Makama, and creating space in front of him for either Makama to drop or another player to drop into that position to get them away on the attack, rather than is actually looking for the pass. So yeah, it's more an individual error than than playing out from the back. So that's kind of the goal. Second half, Paddy, I felt Norwich twofold really. I felt Norwich levels, understandably, they put a lot of energy and effort into that first half, dropped a little bit. I thought Borough's up theirs. But something I think we've seen under Philippe Clement that this team has got a lot better at is staying in games. And we know at this level, if you stay in games, if you're competitive, if there's only one goal in the game, you can create a nervousness. And Philippe Clement referenced this in his post-match, and I agree with him. It was absolutely rocking at the end of Riverside, rightly so. It was a big win in the context of their season. But from about 72 minutes to maybe when Luke Ayling won a foul in the 94th, there was kind of this nervous energy within there that Norwich had created. And that was without, let's have it right, having a single shot on target in the second half. But that chance that Jovan Makama had where he lifts it over the goalkeeper, and I think the goalkeeper gets a touch on it, was about as close as they came. But again, it's keep going back to the same point. It's a marker of their progress now that they are able to keep themselves within a game and to cling on and to prove a very difficult team, a more difficult team. Maybe that's not particularly a high bar, but than they were earlier in the season. That kind of shows that another layer of growth to this team. Yeah,
and I kind of feel like repeating my earlier point that Middlesbrough absolutely wiped the floor with Southampton and Preston previously, and Hellberg. You go back and they're on our channels now, but you go back and look at his post-match quotes yesterday, and it's almost a backhanded compliment, that point about Norwich sticking in the games. I think that's structurally now as well, that they're able to nullify teams a lot better than previously. And he talked about that their passing game was off, Borough's passing game in that second half, and that they wasn't able to as smoothly progress the ball as they did in that first half. Some of the pinball passing, the speed of it did evoke for me the only time I've seen that this season was when they went to Coventry, actually. And it's probably why those two are leading and a decent way clear as well of the rest. When the passing, the fluidity, the rhythm, the understanding of players, some very technically gifted midfield players in central areas in both those two teams for this level, certainly. And but as Hellberg said, and his opinion would I'd say carry the significant weight in this discourse, is that Norwich did such an effective job of disrupting that. I can't think. Yeah, there was a little flurry, as you say rightly. It felt like they had maybe got into them, him and his coaching staff, half time. They came out with a bit of an upped intensity to their work rate. There was one or two balls that flashed across the near post. Morgan Whittaker, couldn't direct one or two on target. But that did then subside, and it became far more for me that last half an hour where Norwich were in control of it. And maybe part of that was the psychology of Borough clinging on to a lead. They know the context, wider context at the top of the table. So you almost go into a little bit of protection mode. But I think actually that was more Norwich were able to, as I say, decode and deconstruct a little bit of that first hour's worth of Middlesbrough really smooth and almost imposing on Norwich the style of game they wanted to play, and made it much more of an even contest. And there was one or two little glimpses there from McCarman. McConville had that diving header from McLean, I think the 88th minute. It didn't translate really into certainly the flow of chances we've seen at Wrexham, West Brom, Coventry. But nevertheless, that point I think is well made. That it's a testament to Clement and his methods. And he's spoken about this, that learning what to do in certain situations and understanding what they need to do, particularly when you're going to a very, very good team who are trying to impose themselves on you. Okay, you're going to have to dig in. You're going to have to show those attributes. But actually, in terms of structurally and your ability to get a hold of the ball and push them back that way, I thought they did that as well. And again, it all flows into this belief that give this guy more time now in the months to come and another transfer window. And, the foundations feel quite solid now, but the exciting element is what floors he can put on, to use a building analogy, in terms of the creativity. And we're starting to see that now, Ali Ahmed, the impact he's had, Papagiello coming into the mix, and one or two of these other new signings, you get the sense are better suited to what Clement's trying to do. And that's why I think, for me, Middlesbrough, albeit a defeat, reinforced that, Norwich, I think next season could maybe be talked about in the same breadth as a Middlesbrough and a Coventry, in terms of they are a cut above of the majority of the division in terms of what they're about, how they go about it, what they do in possession, the attacking edge they carry, and hopefully that defensive resolution. And if they have all those elements, then quite rightly they're going to be at the right end of the table.
Yeah, I mean, I've got the stats in front of me for the second half of yesterday's game, and I think they do paint a really interesting picture, because for all of that we've spoken about there, Norwich only had 3 shots. The first in the second half alone. The first of those was Anis Ben Slimani in the 78th minute. The second one was Jovan Makama in that same minute, where the ball kind of rebounded to him, and then the Rory McConville header. Of course, this is where it's a little bit skewed, because obviously Jovan Makama creates a really big chance towards the end when he lifts the ball over the goalkeeper, but that doesn't get registered as a shot. I mean, you get in expected goals, if you want to deal in those metrics, Norwich were very marginally higher, but I think that kind of illustrates the sort of second half it was, which was very bitty. There were 21 fouls, lots of free kicks, lots of stoppages, lots of substitutions. But in terms of Norwich's threat levels, they were always in that game. They were always competitive, and even with that kind of slight dip after half time that I think we both felt, they were still able to kind of hold in there and to hold their own, and to sit on the ropes for a little while and be able to absorb some pressure, which is just something they weren't able to do earlier in the season. So many times on this podcast and various other channels, we've spoken about how essentially, you could blow on them and they would fall over in terms of adversity. And again, interestingly, drilling to some of the numbers, they had more passes in Middlesbrough's half than Middlesbrough did in Norwich's half, which is, I think is pretty fascinating. So there's lots there to like from that performance, Paddy. And I think it just because we haven't really discussed Coventry, because obviously we didn't do a podcast because of the scheduling and whatnot, which I won't bore people with, but that and this run, to be fair, you could start it at Wrexham and end it with Middlesbrough. That felt quite daunting. I think we might have even said on a podcast, if they can get to the start of February and they can still be clinging on in there and they can still have a decent amount of points between them and their sides around them, that would probably mark a successful period to then go in and really attack this one in February that is coming up. They've bettered that. 9 points from 12 is remarkable. And it's why, for me, and we spoke about this a little bit pre-game, no game in the Championship is a free hit. When Norwich going, especially in Norwich's position anyway. So it absolutely was not that. But I think their work and what they had done in the previous 3, the points that they had taken, meant that there was a bit less pressure on them heading to Middlesbrough in terms of the overall table. And equally, we've kind of seen it was only really Portsmouth in and around them that were able to find a result. And that came against West Brom. So even that wasn't the worst case in the world. So my point is, you look at kind of this month as a whole, really, but particularly zooming in on the last 4 games, that for where they are represents well, if you were anywhere in the Championship table, 9 points from 12 would be remarkable, particularly in the position they're in. They've given themselves a hell of a chance to get out of it now.
And we all expect, well, we do, I think, that to be the case. And if that is the case, we can look back in May, and this was probably the catalyst, this period, for the reasons you've mapped out there, the level of opponent, the daunting nature of the run, back to back, Wrexham, West Brom, 2 tough away games for different reasons, but nevertheless, 6 points from that in your back pocket, and then you turn over Coventry deservedly. Falling behind as well, worth reiterating that. They came back and showed that side to them because, those other games, they got their noses in front, and it's a very different mentality. And again, that's a very positive collective signal for the group that they can withstand even when they do fall behind. And didn't quite go for them against Middlesbrough, but you're right. Before the first whistle goes at Wrexham, if you'd have said, right, these next 4 games, you're taking 9 points, not sure even the most optimistic Norwich fan would have thought you were probably dealing in a currency that was likely to transpire. So that is huge testament to Clement, coaching staff, all the staff, and the players, and it does now set up. And of course, nothing's a given in the Championship, and the fact that it's Blackburn and it's Oxford, and I think there's Birmingham in there as well, isn't there, this month? And there's 1 or 2 I've forgotten. But certainly, looking at it, more favourable swing of fixtures. But you'd be a fool if you thought that then is necessarily going to translate into the similar haul again. They will have to be every bit as good in all these facets to prevail, because it's a different type of pressure now. You go to, well, Blackburn come here. I think they're in the bottom 3, and you would think that they would show some fight and some resilience and make it a very horrible game. And likewise, Oxford away midweek. That isn't going to be an easy assignment. So maybe the pressure is going to shift now, and the expectancy will shift. And because Norwich have done what they've done in these 4 games, not a sense that it's a given, but that Norwich should go and do that. And that is a different mindset, and Philippe Clement will have to manage that aspect as well, and reinforce on. I'm sure he will, because of his experience. That Blackburn turn up at Carrow Road on Saturday. It's not a rollover job. Norwich will have to be all the positive elements we've seen so far from Clement, but particularly distilled into this January run. Will have to be there again, and if they're not, as we've seen, whoever the head coach is, whatever the group of players, Norwich in the Championship, if you're not at it, you can get found out. And even in the really, really purple spells under the Farkers and the Alex Neils, those 2 that spring to mind, you would have faced this run of games, and there was still very difficult assignments to navigate a path through. So, yeah, I think it would be foolhardy in the extreme now to think, right, take a deep breath, exhale. We've got through those 4 games. The next 4, they'll be able to coast through and go 9 points, 12 points, and onwards and upwards. I think the reality is the Championship is very good. If you get even a degree of complacency, you will swiftly be pulled back down. And of course, you referenced there Portsmouth. There will be those teams in and around them now still who will start to put their own little runs and little bursts together, because we see that season in, season out. So, yeah, there's absolutely, I'm sure, no hint of complacency or a feeling that part of the season is done now, and we don't need to worry about, Norwich don't need to worry about, what's over their shoulders and getting sucked into a battle for survival. I think very much the message should be from inside the group and then externally as well that there's some hard yards ahead.
Which there are. I mean, you speak about it there. You look at their next 4 Championship games. Obviously, they've got an FA Cup game against West Brom in there. But Blackburn next Saturday, early kickoff. Then it is Oxford midweek, as you said. Then that FA Cup game. Then Birmingham at home. And then Sheffield Wednesday at home. And then if you want to play that game as well, Leicester away. So actually the month of February looking like it's going to be pretty critical for where Norwich City are. And you mentioned that Blackburn game next weekend. Well, in midweek they play Sheffield Wednesday, so a gap of 4 points as it is at the moment. Let's be generous to Sheffield Wednesday. Have won one game all season and drawn 20 defeats, which is by far and away the most in the division. You wouldn't be surprising if Blackburn were able to get a positive result from that one of their games in hand on Norwich. It is possible that we go into that game with Norwich City 1 point outside the relegation zone, and that 1 point being behind Blackburn Rovers, who they face. That would make it significantly bigger. And then obviously it's Oxford as well. So these next two feel absolutely mammoth for what they're trying to do. But that run generally as well. We'll come back to next week and the next two games momentarily. But I think we've got to delve into all things transfer related. I'll give you a time point that we are recording this because, as ever, with transfer markets and windows, and particularly at this stage of them, they become very febrile and very frenetic, and things change at the drop of a hat. But as of 10 to 2 on the 1st of February, so tomorrow, Monday, is deadline day. We're expecting, Norwich City to do a couple of bits and bobs, aren't we, Paddy? That's certainly what Philippe Clement intimated after the game. One of which a striker, and I think as we record, Mohamed Toure is going through his medical and all of the bits to try and get that move from Randers confirmed in very due course. More interestingly is this pursuit for a midfielder, Paddy, which seems to rumble on. We've had some reports this morning about Glenn Kamara, who obviously a name that some people might recognise, of formerly playing for Leeds and under Philippe Clement at Rangers, now at Rennes, having had a spell in Saudi. Some sort of fresh French reports indicating that was a low move that Norwich City were interested in. It's a really interesting pursuit, isn't it? Given Pelle Matson's injury and obviously Miko Topic is out. They are light in that area at the moment. So an interesting 24, 26, 28 hours ahead of us from a Norwich City perspective to try and get their business done this month.
Yeah, when we always think it's going to be a relatively quiet end to the window, they're usually the windows that actually the opposite is true. I mean, you go on bore all the listeners and / viewers with your tale of Danny Barton Hwang that transfer deadline day.
Yeah,
evening, following morning.
Yeah, it was early morning in the end. That was, I'm trying to think what summer it was. Would it have been summer 2023, maybe? If I've got my season right, I think it was there, maybe 2024. No, I think it was 2023. Yeah, it was very late, wasn't it, that they confirmed? I think it was Barton Hwang confirmed within half an hour of each other at 1 o'clock in the morning. So
that was on Obama Daily as well, wasn't it? That was deadline day.
Obama Daily went to Forest as well, so that was a particularly hectic one. Then obviously we had last January, which turned out to be early hours as well, when Jacob Wright was confirmed from Manchester City, and that was very late. I don't think anyone foresaw that move coming, even some inside Norwich, before it actually began to unfold and to play out in the way that it did. A late opportunity that popped up that they seized upon, and I think we're seeing the benefits of that. Thankfully, though, Paddy, for our sakes, get the world's smallest violin out. The deadline is now 7 p.m, so we'll at least be tucked up in bed, even with a deal sheet, hopefully by about 10:30, 11 o'clock, which isn't too bad, really.
No, that's my bedtime, that, Connor. So it needs to be by then with two little ones in the house. But and we'll scenario plan it. I mean, Toure, unless there is, Philippe Clement. I'm not going to paraphrase. Well, I will paraphrase. I'm not going to verbatim, but he was along the lines of, I think, that deal will get done. But I've been in the game too long. I'm not going to make myself look a fool by saying it's signed, sealed when it isn't, and it falls down. But all the indications, even this morning prior to recording, are that that's progressing to a path where that will be done. Button press maybe even later tonight. I think more likely tomorrow. So take that card off the table, and then it is all systems go for this. Quote Clement again, ball playing number 6, i.e. a Pelle Matson type, and they'll be doing well to find a Pelle Matson, I think, in this very back end of the window, because as we know, it's an area they looked at earlier in the window. I mean, the talk of Glenn Kamara, suggestion is that maybe he was a name they looked at the start of the window. Whether they've gone back in subsequently, those latest French reports saying loan, that to me would make sense. Particularly if contractually there's not a deal to be done there at the moment with Rennes, because Norwich needs somebody in the here and now, and I think they can't do a permanent. I think they will have inevitably to countenance a loan, because I don't think you can get to 7 p.m. tomorrow and not have that ball playing number 6 in the building now. I think that was evident yesterday. Well, knowing that Jacob Wright isn't that profile of player, if they were maybe seeing, well, could him and McLean offer a different blend, but yet still as effective, it didn't really work. And Jacob Wright was, hooked early in the second half. So if they were in two minds, I think that probably confirms that they do need somebody more in the Maatsen profile that they don't simply have now, with him out and Mirko Topic out for the season with his ACL knee injury. So it would appear that tomorrow now is going to be, who are they getting and where they're getting them from, and is it a permanent or is it a loan? I mean, around that, of course, there'll be the inevitable, trimming of the squad. I think that's reasonable to expect. But all in all, I don't even want to countenance a scenario where the Sargent thing blows up. I have just checked there and about that, which he's been linked with previously, and we know the connection with Farker, who brought him to Norwich, that maybe Leeds, if they miss out on Strand Larsen, you'll think they're very heavily gone down the path with, but seems they're vying with Palace for him, and they may have lost that race. If that is so, and they are looking for a striker, do they pivot to him? So all of these imponderables are why we get a Hwang and Danny Bart or a Jacob Wright type window, where you wake up on deadline morning, you think, right, it's going to be very straightforward tomorrow. It's just going to be this number 6, and they'll do that, and then it'll be everybody putting their feet up and with their cocoa around 10 o'clock at night, and then all hell breaks loose, because that was the point I was putting to Philippe on Friday about the panic and the fever that grips, and it's probably fueled inevitably by likes of us and more so Sky with their yellow ties and in the Jim White era, but it's almost an event, and that just leads itself to this feeding frenzy, and a lot of it is speculative rather than actual tangible things happening. But nevertheless, that adds to a sense of drama, and you get swept along with that, and there will be, you can guarantee there will be left field links to players that Norwich are in for, or clubs are looking at Norwich players, maybe Sargent, maybe not, maybe other players. So let's just strap in for what is the fun and games of deadline day. But I think when the dust settles, at this stage, sat here Sunday afternoon, I think the expectation would be it'll be 2 more in the building, the striker and a centre mid, and then maybe 1 or 2 out on loan, and then we'll take a pause, let that window close, and then we'll move on to Sargent MLS windows March 26th, and have all those fun and games repeated yet again.
Yeah, well, I don't think Leeds is any closer to the US, so I'm not quite sure I see that one. If his heart is, well, but then again, it's Canada, isn't it? So how much do you buy these things anyway, I guess? But yeah, we'll see. I think fun and games ahead. I'll recap very quickly a story of how I spent last January deadline day with that Jacob Wright stuff unfolded, which was so myself and obviously Sam and Adam at the time were all over at the Nest. We were speaking to Jack Wilshere, we were speaking to Tony Roberts. There was an event there that they were part of. So I finished there. And then I can't remember if my car was in for a service or something was going on with my car. So I had to take that. And basically I was preparing for like the last stint, because I think it was still 11, wasn't it? Last year. So I was kind of doing the live blog, seeing it through. And I remember speaking to yourself and others, and it'll be all right. It'll be nice and quiet. I'll just sort of see it through, and it'll be kind of general. Here's what's happening here. And I'll be in bed by 11:05. Brilliant, job done. And then obviously you start to get wind. I think it was about 7, 8 o'clock, wasn't it, around that Jacob Wright stuff, and all hell broke loose. So it goes to show that even sometimes your expectations and what you think may well happen can prove to be completely different if the right opportunity comes up. One thing we're not two things probably we're not expecting, Paddy. There's been a real clamour from some, not everyone, for a right winger this month. That doesn't seem at this stage, again with the caveat of Jacob Wright, and look, there could be something unbelievable that pops up that they go with, but we're not expecting that to materialize. And also obviously we've got to speak about the left back situation, which feels like the what is it, the Professor of the Dark Arts one from Harry Potter, which is, if you're in that role, you're just cursed seemingly, and you're going to get an injury at some stage. Harry Amass, who joins Norwich City on loan from Manchester United to help ease some of their injury concerns at left back, is now injured himself. A hamstring injury that is being assessed, but one that Philippe Clement offered a very gloomy kind of prognosis on after the game at the Riverside. Said it was serious. Not what Norwich City need when they're already without Jeffrey Schlupp. They're already without Lucien Mahovo. Ben Krezene has just come back from injury recently as well. 4 left backs in the building, and only one of them is fit and available at this stage. But Paddy, crucially, it doesn't sound like they are going to be dipping into the market for an emergency to the emergency in terms of left back. Have we lost Paddy? We may well have.
Sorry,
lost
Connor.
Paddy.
You know what I'm doing?
I'm
basically scrolling around looking just to see if there's anything kicking off, and then I couldn't find my tab that I had open here. So we're very unprofessional. But
no, it's all right. I thought I'd lost you then, to be honest.
No. It
probably would improve my rambling.
It would improve the overall performance of this podcast, no doubt, if I was just here mute. But no, there's nothing more to add about Leeds. I think. As you say, that's not much nearer to St. Louis, put it that way. So, but I thought I better just have a scan because that's the nature of it. When we get into this, what are we now? 24 plus, about 30 hours out. You basically have to strap in and not be too far away from an electronic device. But so apologies. What were you asking me there about the left back? Yeah,
correct. Yes. Yeah.
Well. Yeah, I mean it's a terrible news as I put in my point. It's terrible news for the lad, on a personal level because he'd really caught the eye at Sheffield Wednesday. They obviously think highly of him at Manchester United. He's 18 and he's made his first team debut and he's played in Europe and he might not be the Man United of their pomp, but nevertheless it's an absolutely mammoth football club. So there is a player there that they view as a part of their future, and albeit it was a very small cameo against Coventry, but he probably showed his versatility when Philippe put him on the right hand side. I mean, hell of a lot of trust shown in a very young player there at a critical moment in the game, and there's no doubt I think he would have got his opportunities in tandem with Ben Krezene down the stretch. So first and foremost, your thoughts are with him, but yeah, of course, you zoom out a touch, and from a Norwich perspective, to now be in a situation where it is effectively Ben Krezene as a senior left back specialist, because of course, into this equation now has to come Kellen Fisher and Jack Stacey in terms of their versatility. We've seen it, those two playing on that side often. It's nowhere near ideal. It's not clearly a route they'd want to go down, but as Philippe made it abundantly clear, they've got 4 left backs on the payroll that they're paying for. They cannot countenance paying for a 5th for another 4 or 5 months of this season. So the solutions will have to come from within the current group. And that would, you think, in the first resort, be Krezene trying to keep him fit. And if that isn't the case, or his performance levels dip, because he's had his own fitness issues over the last season or two, then it probably is then perming Stacey and Fisher. And, of course, Cordoba can play out there in an emergency, Kenny McLean. But I don't see how you can put him there now with no Matson and no Topic, and pull him out of centre mid. So it's a real tightrope walk for Philippe Clement now to have to navigate. But the reality is, from a financial point of view, you can understand why they can't really now, particularly as they're about to do a striker and they're looking to do a centre mid as well. They are the priorities, not another left back when you have Ben Krezene. But equally, from a footballing perspective, it does feel like the bed sheet in that area of the squad is being pulled very, very thinly, and it wouldn't be the first time, would it, in seasons past, that Norwich are going to have to come up with some creative solution there to fill that gap on the left hand side of their defence. But for me, it's probably the right call, I think, at this stage, because there's a footballing dimension, but I think the financial one would hold way, and I don't think Norwich, where they're at now, can can really feel that they can go out, and of course as well as they're probably finding with the centre mid search as well. You know, they went for Harry Amass for a reason, because they looked at a list and he was at the top of that list. The ones that are lower down that list may now have been snapped up elsewhere, and that availability just inevitably, as you get into hours rather than days of the window, it contracts, and that might be a difficult one. Maybe they have looked at it in the last few days and just thought, look, it's partly the financial element, but equally maybe they don't feel that there is an option out there that would fit what they're trying to do more broadly, as Amass clearly did. So yeah, it's just an horrendous turn of events for club and player, but I don't see, for me, it's certainly not a priority beyond the centre mid. You know, the striker, you could argue with Chris Gordon in the building and with McCarmer in the building, and obviously the situation around Sargent to resolve. Maybe not a priority. I think personally they did need to do a striker, because they have to give them that insurance with the way the Sargent situation is currently in a standoff. So that had, for me, had to happen at the back end of this window, and the centre mid is an absolute priority. So I guess it just comes down to priorities and finances, and you can understand where Philippe Clement has mapped out the thought process there.
Yeah, I've just Googled actually, and I'll tell you my exact words. It was how to break a curse, and it says common methods includes cleansing rituals, protective spells like using salt or herbs, prayer, taking proactive steps to cut ties with the source of negativity. What do you feel, Paddy? What are we gonna have to do to break this left back curse? There must be. I mean, Barry Fry infamously.
I was just going to go that route. Yeah,
four corners of St Andrews when he was Birmingham boss. So I don't know. Do we need to go down that route with somebody? I don't know who would do that.
Well, that has to be Philippe Clement, wouldn't it? But you can ask him that. I'm not going to ask him that. So I don't know.
Well, Ian Holloway,
to be fair,
when he went in at Swindon, I think he said there was a similar case. I can't remember what it was around now, but I'm pretty sure he got his wife into. I don't know what she did now. I'm going to have to Google it while you're speaking, but I'm pretty sure there was a situation in the curse there that he took methods to try and break. So maybe they're going to have to give Ian Holloway's wife a call.
Well, maybe we'll throw this open now to the audience. I mean, if they can contact us via any of the PinkUn maybe socials or our personal socials, just what you would suggest. We've hit on an unexpected feature here, Connor. It's almost as if we planned it.
But, here you go. I'll read it to you. So Ian Holloway, this was in November 2024. So after he took over, he Swindon. Said at Swindon, he claimed their poor run of form could be down to the training ground being haunted. There were some strange things happening after the captain, Ollie Clark, ruptured a tendon in his ankle during training. And he added that he would be asking his wife to cleanse the area with sage, as it is close to an ancient burial site. So who knows? Maybe that is something that Norwich need to do to solve their left back situation.
Maybe it's the vegetable patch at Colney. Maybe they need to have a look at the veg they got in there. Maybe, I don't know. It's I mean, it's this season, but you go back to Jakob Sorensen playing left back in the title winning season, so it isn't a new phenomenon. So maybe that does add more fuel to your clearly your conviction that there's a curse that needs lifting now around whether it's Colney or Carrow Road or both.
We need to find a Norwich left back who's been cursed previously, that has maybe inflicted this, or maybe been wronged recently. Sorry, that has inflicted this curse on Norwich City left backs thereafter. That if you play there, you're guaranteed to get injured, because it's felt like a problem area. We used to be centre backs, didn't it? We used to have kind of central midfielders and full backs playing there in the Farker days, and now it seems to have moved to left back. So yeah, if anyone's got any ideas of what we can do, then do let us know, and on socials or below this video, what Norwich City can do to try and cleanse their training ground or whatever needs to be cleansed as well, to get rid of this left back issue, and probably generally the issue that they seem to have with hamstring issues as well, which seem to pop up all over the place. Away from that nonsense, Paddy, as we said, a big month of games ahead. I'm going to zoom in particularly on these next two. As I said, there's a situation where Blackburn get 3 points on Tuesday night against Sheffield Wednesday. That game at Carrow Road next week at lunchtime, 12:31 kickoff, of course, for the campaign around CPR that they are doing with in association with Tom Lockyer, which is yeah, fantastic campaign. I think it's a really good way to raise awareness. But it's potentially a huge game. If that situation that we paint out does happen, Blackburn win in midweek, they come to Carrow Road a point behind Norwich. That feels to me probably more like a must not lose game rather than one that they would absolutely have to win. But I see your eyebrows raised. Maybe you feel it's more of a must win.
No, I was just looking at the Championship table there. Oxford go to Sheffield United midweek, and there is a bit of a point. I mean, the points gap to Norwich is, where are we? 33 for Norwich, 27 for Oxford. So I think they're dealing in wins, and they've got Sheffield United, and then they've got should have checked, shouldn't I, who they got at the weekend coming after that, but Coventry. Okay,
well, that's a win then.
Well, they won't beat the mighty Cov. So no, they're at Coventry. If it was the other way around, then I'd say they'd definitely beat Cov, because their travel sickness is off the chart. But so they got two. So that's an interesting one for them. They got Sheffield United, they got Coventry away, and then they entertain Norwich. So they, in theory, could find themselves, it might be win or bust territory by the time Norwich pitch up there. And likewise, if Blackburn get that result midweek against Sheffield Wednesday, it just brings them closer, and they will come to Carrow Road and think, okay, well, we get a result here today, we suck them firmly back in as well. So, so many dynamics in play now, these next two games from a Norwich perspective. But I'm trying to think, which I mean, because prior to this run of, Norwich, Oxford was his first game in charge, wasn't it? First home game in charge under Clement, and that was the game they should have won. And then, the defending stoppage time wasn't the best, and they walk off the pitch there, and it's a draw. I'm just trying to think some of the teams down the bottom end, how he is mapped or how he's gone. Obviously West Brom is the most recent example, and they absolutely did a job on them, but they were in a bit of disarray there. I'm not sure Blackburn and Oxford will be necessarily as compliant as West Brom were that night. And talking more broadly about this situation at the bottom, you would fear for them now. They've got beat again, as you said earlier, at Portsmouth. I'm not convinced by that Eric Ramsey. I sat there and watched listened to his post-match press conference. He was just, for me, not a man who I felt could inspire a group of players. He's very highly regarded as a coach, but it's a world of coach and man management and getting inside players' heads. And Clement seems to be able to ride both of those horses, it would seem. So I would fear for them if I was anything to do with West Brom. And, Sheffield Wednesday have gone, let's be honest. So there's probably one more place to play with as it stands, and Leicester are in this mix now if they get that points deduction the way they're heading down. So, but that's all by the by. It really has to be blinkers on from a Norwich perspective and get the job done against Blackburn, get the job done against Oxford, and that might reasonably be, you could argue then, them extracted properly from any late season relegation concerns, and then it's onwards and upwards. But to do that, they will have to, and it'll probably be very different games from Coventry, from Middlesbrough. You could feasibly see in both of those games that Norwich will have low blocks to deal with, and teams who come and set up in a way that they would view maybe a point against Norwich for different reasons as a good result, or just not to get beat. So can Norwich be that progressive on the front foot, breaking down to very difficult opponents in terms of out of possession methodology? So we'll see. They've certainly now, you would think, added a layer of attacking threat with Ali Ahmed, with Papagiallo primarily, and it's Glenn Samlani. I think that type of game will suit him better where Norwich have more of the ball, and he can work those pockets of space and use his intelligence to feed those balls through to those other players. Jovan, he's just had it inevitably, as you would expect with a young player. He's had this unbelievable purple patch around that pre-festive and then festive period, and he's just dipped a little bit in terms of goal output. It'd be very timely for him to come back on the goal trail, and and if he does that, then I'm pretty confident Norwich. Because I don't know if you were leading me to what points haul they could possibly get from these next two games, but I'm going to go there anyway. I would say.
Am I that predictable?
Yes.
No, to be fair, I am. That is where I was leading you, to be fair. So, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I'd like to say 6, but I just think that just the nature of the championship, it can beat you up if you're not at it, and who knows, in terms of the fitness and injury situation from here, what it looks like in the next 2 games. So I'm going to go 4 points from 6, which I don't think is the worst return. They've not lost ground on any of those clubs, so that's a real positive. And you'd like to think if they take 4 from the next 6, they're probably making up ground on the teams above them. So, yeah, I'm going to go relatively positive and go 4 from 6, and then bowl that one back to you, Connor.
6. I think they'll win both of them.
That's very positive.
It is. So now, when it all crumbles and goes wrong, you can all directly hold me responsible. But I think this feels like the moment. If January was the one to, I guess, maybe lay the foundations and to get some of those points on the board to help lift them away, I really hope this is the month where they then can get themselves away, because if they win those 3 home games this month, which for me feel more important, I think, which are, as we said, Blackburn, it's Sheffield Wednesday, and it's Birmingham. All of those, I think, feel Birmingham's tough. I think Birmingham will be tough, but I think all of them, there is an opportunity for them to take points. Let's say they win all 3. They've just won 3 games on the spin prior to this game. That would take them to 42 points, which they'd be nearly there, I think, in terms of where they would need to be, and that's on the basis that they didn't pick up points at Oxford or anywhere else. So it's a big old month, and I think if they can get a really positive start to it, maybe we can have some conversations then about what the rest of the season looks like and how they can build up momentum going into the summer. So yeah, I think they will. I think Clement in all games, to be fair, has made them much more competitive, a much better team. They don't look like a team that are in their current position, as we've discussed, I think, for a number of weeks. So I'm backing them to continue that progress. But like you, with the caveat that the Championship does have a nasty way of catching you on the chin when you feel like you're in a good moment. And also, like you say, it's going to be really intriguing to see how, and I think this may be a general trend between now and the end of the season, how Norwich deal with teams coming to Carrow Road and setting up in a slightly different way, in terms of perhaps looking to be a little bit more pragmatic and defensive and absorbing that pressure. That's a different challenge to maybe what they've faced so far. Just a footnote at the end of this podcast, because I did want to mention this, but I don't think we're going to get time to come on to it. Yesterday was Philippe Clement's 15th game in charge of Norwich City. That's significant because it matches Liam Manning's tenure. And just to kind of go for, obviously, he started very well at Huddersfield, which has been good to see on a human level. But if you look at Liam Manning's record, played 15 games, Norwich won 2, drew 3 and lost 10, scored 14, conceded 23, 9 points. That was the 23rd best record in the Championship. Philippe Clement played 15, won 7, drawn 3, lost 5, scored 23. So goals up by 9, and conceded only 19. So down by, what's that? My quick maths is very poor. 4 or 5 points 24, which is the 8th best record in the Championship. So that shows the level of progress that they have made. And since his arrival, as Kim Helborg spoke about, they have been a team that we would associate, if the season started when he came in, which sadly it didn't, Norwich would now be kind of a playoff chasing team. And that is why I'm going to back them to do the business and to get 2 very, very big wins in the context of their Championship season. Let's hope. Let's see if that happens. And we will be back with you next weekend after that colossal game at Carrow Road, early kickoff against Blackburn Rovers. It's going to be fascinating to see how Norwich City cope with all of that. For all of you deadline day coverage, PinkUn.com and the PinkUn Plus app, the place to go. We'll have a live blog. We'll have some I'm sure some Q&As throughout the day, and all of that good stuff will bring you every twist and turn that may unfold. Hopefully we're in bed nice and early. That would symbolise a successful transfer deadline day from our perspective. And we will bring you all of that coverage building up to that game against Blackburn next weekend. Enjoy your week. Thank you very much for watching. Subscribe to our YouTube channel or our podcast feeds, which are available on all of the various places that you get your podcasts from. And whenever there's a new episode, they will drop simply in there. So please do that, and all that good stuff as well. Paddy, thank you very much. Thank you all very much for watching and listening. We'll see you again very soon.